My name's Bronwen Golder. I'm the director of the Kermadec Initiative for the Pew Charitable Trusts. So I'm an oceans advocate, if you like, working very specifically to secure protection of a large area of New Zealand called the Kermadecs, 620,000 square kilometres of ocean. But over the 5 years, sadly, that it has taken us to yet secure a decision from the government about protection of that area, we've obviously become very involved in a kind of a whole of ocean discussion, and more importantly, a discussion about how we are managing or not managing our ocean in New Zealand. I think, you know, what Tim's done is kind of introduce the ocean, the 71% of the planet. We have a single ocean, so we are interconnected all around the world. And what is happening to it at a global scale is incredibly important. And, you know, but also if you take all the water out of the ocean, you know, it is all interconnected. I think sometimes it's easier for us as citizens of the land to almost understand our ocean by taking all the water out of it and seeing that we are just kind of little peaks within this big landscape, that the ocean is a landscape. You know, it is an area that is inhabited by species, and we then put water on it and we sort of move across it. But in fact, it is connected fundamentally to us and to how we live within it. New Zealand, you know, take the water away, that's what our ocean floor looks like. You know, we sit on this continental shelf. We have these underwater mountain ranges that go from, you know, the central plateau way up to Tonga. We have these deep trenches where, you know, different plates of the planet find each other. That's the natural world. The question then becomes, and I think some of the issues that Tim identified are what we all are now pondering, how do we manage this space so that it stays healthy? And what is our responsibility in terms of managing it? And what are the instruments that we have to ensure that we manage it for the future, that we manage it for the long term? And it was really interesting, earlier this year, Dame Anne Salmon gave her Rutherford lectures. And if any of you are you know, concerned and passionate about the oceans, I think her lecture, The Sea, is one of the best articulations of our New Zealand ocean story that I've heard or read in a very long time. One of the things she said I found very important, and she came at this from a slightly different perspective to me, but I think it still resonated, and she talked about cartographic simplification or imperialisation of our sea. You know, what do we do to it as humans? And she talked like this, and hopefully this will make sense as a thread through the rest of what I say. She said, drawn from the eye of God's perspective, they, the cartographers, transformed the ocean, grey or blue or green, the home of birds, of fish and whales, surging with tides or currents, into a static, white, two-dimensional expanse, gridded by lines of latitude and longitude, mathematically petitioned and measured to be managed. And what she's saying is we took this, right, we took our ocean and we start to draw lines around it, because that's what we do as nations, as government, as people. So the first line that we have here drawn is our EEZ, the law of the sea, big UN agreement that took, you know, over a decade to negotiate. All the nations around the world were allowed to determine that their boundary, their territory, the place that they rule over, is 200 nautical miles from your outlying lands. So by virtue of the sub-Antarctic islands, the Chathams and the Kermadecs, New Zealand, one of the smallest countries in the world, has the fourth largest ocean territory in the world. Right? So through a UN convention, a piece of international policy, we were essentially given, our government was given, the fourth largest ocean space on the planet. Then, and I can skite a little bit about this, people like my husband, then negotiated the delimitation of our continental shelf, and we became even more powerful. We have even more. And he likes to remind me of that. So this is our territory. It's over 4.5 million square kilometres of space that we are responsible for. What we then start to do, if you look at maps of New Zealand, is we do exactly what Damien suggests we do. We start to draw lines, because in order to manage a space that is almost unmanageable, that we almost can't imagine, most of us can't imagine what our ocean is like beyond the horizon. We don't really know what's there. You know, we're familiar with our beach or our coast, but we're not really familiar with our deep ocean. So for the different sectors, for the different stakeholders who are interested in that ocean, we start to divide it up so that we can manage it, right? So we can be responsible, so that we have policy. So we take this and we say these are the fisheries management areas, right? So we divide it up, and so that we know what, you know, we all know here what snapper one is. But we have our fishing areas, and quotas relate to areas. We manage our fishery in this kind of way. We have block offers for oil and gas and minerals. And the government every year calls a tender, and they define an area on the map, and they draw lines, and they delimit, and this represents these lines. About 15% of our EEZ has had some lines drawn around it, and the companies are told you can go explore there, you can go look there. Then we draw these really little lines, and they represent what we've decided to protect, right? So we have the 4th biggest marine space in the world. We have an even bigger continental shelf space. We have 33% of our land protected. We have 15% made available for oil and gas and mineral exploration. We have 100% made available for fishing. Well, actually, that's a lie. We have 99.5% available for fishing, and we have 0.5% protected. We don't have any baselines to help us measure the kind of changes that Tim's talking about. We haven't taken the time to think about non-use values of this ocean space and the lines that we need to draw in order to protect it. This is the Kermadec here. It's a large, almost sort of physically distinct part of our ocean space. It's 620,000 square kilometres all told. And as I said, you know, it's got these amazing underwater geological and physical features, which I won't bore you with. Even in this place, we draw lines, right? It's not that I don't want to bore you with science, it's just that it's not my strength. Tom Trinsky or Rochelle can talk about those things. But here, there's some little lines for some marine reserves around the islands that go out to 12 nautical miles. This is actually the largest group of marine reserves that we have. There's some purple lines that you probably can't see that are permit areas for miners if they decide that they want to go explore there. The little triangles are active submarine volcanoes. We can draw maps with lines. None of that's protected. It's a place that National Geographic's called one of the most pristine ocean spaces left on the planet. It's our baseline for our subtropical, temperate subtropical area. There are no lines there to help protect it. We can also draw other kinds of maps. Rochelle, don't laugh. There are other kinds of maps that tell us why these places are really important. This is a whaling map from the late 1800s. Those are all dead whales. Every single dot, right? And there are years of those maps. Those should be helping us to draw lines in places where whales used to congregate to help them congregate again. These are our baselines that should be informing our policy. Tracks of species that move between the Pacific and New Zealand. They draw their own lines. You never find these on a policy map or a management map. Right? This is the invisible kind of stuff that should be informing, just as Tim's comments about changing temperatures and sea level rise, all of those factors need to be brought in to the way that we think about our ocean policy, but currently they're not. This is us tracking some fishing vessels that were fishing illegally, both within our territory, and then out here they put some nets in the water. And after tracking them for 9 months, we and a number of governments managed to get those vessels IUU listed and then fined $6 million, right? They're drawing plenty of lines in our ocean. But we're not really paying attention because we're not thinking about how we manage that ocean space. Because you're allowed to fish it, and if there's minerals there, you're allowed to mine it, but, we don't know about protection. We haven't got an instrument for that. That's a traditional Polynesian sailing vessel, sailing through the Kermadec late last year en route to Auckland. They followed stars, they followed the currents, they followed the lines of nature from the Pacific to New Zealand. All of these things are tangible in terms of how we think about the ocean space. Why do I talk to you about Polynesian voyages and bird tracks and whaling maps? Because at the moment, with less than 0.5% of our marine space protected, we also do not have a single policy or legislative instrument that allows us to protect that space. We have instruments to regulate fishing, we have instruments to regulate mining, we have instruments to regulate petroleum and gas, and they're good ones sometimes. We have instruments for recreation, we have activities within our ocean space that generate economic returns, but we don't have any baselines. We're not investing in the science that's needed to understand this ocean in order for us to be able to deal with not just how we manage our own territory, but how we join the rest of the world in managing that big single ocean in the face of the kind of climate changes and sea level rise challenges that we in New Zealand are facing. I think one of the great things about this report is that it talks about the fact that we all need to come together to figure out how we are going to manage our ocean, how we are going to achieve balance, how we are going to develop policy which future-proofs as best we can the state of our ocean. The difficult thing for those of us who work in this field and who know that whether you're industry or an NGO or a community group or an iwi or a scientist, we all do actually care about the ocean from different perspectives, but we all care. What's absent at the moment is a convening authority. Nobody is convening us. Nobody is bringing us together with the stakeholders of New Zealand's ocean to talk about its future. And there is very little, dare I say even none, vision to guide us and the political will to drive it. And I hope what this report does is it does convene those of us from across all of those sectors to think about the ocean, to think about how we're going to manage its future, to think about the lines that still need to be drawn in that ocean, to protect some of it, to deal with some of the catastrophes and probably events that are going to come. How do we future-proof our place, land and sea, and how do we keep it healthy? And finding and then sort of encouraging political leadership and vision. I think there's a lot of us who would convene around the table and follow the lead in order to be able to ensure that, you know, in the future, for future generations, we can look at our ocean space and we can, with credibility, say that it is healthy and well managed. Because right now we can't. Thank you.